So yeah, for this first talk, we have Michele Orrù from CNRS and La Sorbonne talking us about a library targeted to facilitating the Fiat-Shamir transformation.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. And even before starting, I would like to say that this work is actually not only mine, but it has been the collaboration of a series of talks for over 1 year with Dimitri from Ethereum Foundation, Trevor that was working with Signal, but also from François, Nicolas Montblat, and JP Omasson. So the credit is not only mine for this. We're going to be talking about Fiat-Shamir. What is Fiat-Shamir? It's a transformation. It's an heuristic that allows us to take a public coin protocol. What does it mean for a protocol to be public coin? It means that it's interactive, so there is a prover and the verifier. They are talking to each other. And the verifier is only sending random challenges. And at the end is checking what we call a verification equation to make sure that everything is correct. And we take this public coin protocol, so again, interactive with random challenges, and we transform into a non-interactive argument through something that we call random oracle. And as long as you believe that the random oracle exists, and then you will end up with a valid non-interactive proof. There are several advantages why you want in practice to use the Fiat-Shamir transform. Mostly that it kills all communication, so you have no latency, and especially in blockchain applications, sometimes you don't even know who you're talking to. It gives you zero knowledge, so adversarial verifiers would be covered in this case. And finally, it will be publicly verifiable. So there's a ton of advantages for using the Fiat-Shamir transform. However, it's also a source of vulnerabilities. And historically, we've had tons of works that have been illustrated this. We have now a rate, I think, of one paper every 5 years that rediscovers faults in modern systems. And the bottom line of this talk is maybe there is a mental model that allows us to avoid some of these bugs. Some of these bugs historically, just to give you an overview, have been on the zero knowledge part and some on the soundness part. And if you start having problems on both, then there is a high risk that it will cover like really important properties of your system. The one thing that breaks always zero knowledge has been happening for the PS3 when Sony was signing their games. Was that you had a prover that was sending 2 messages, but you were able to produce 2 different challenges. And if this happens, actually, you're able to recover the full witness. And in the case of Sony, they were able to recover the secret key for signing games, which was pretty bad. On the soundness part, instead, is more the bugs that happen the most time is that the way that we do the Fiat-Shamir transform does not provide enough context to the hash. We do not hash enough elements. And like this has been discovered for Helios. There has been this frozen bleed attack more recently. It was found on SwissPost. There has been a long history of softwares that just did not put enough elements in their Fiat-Shamir transform, and this led to attacks. Just to be clear, the thing that when you're doing a zero knowledge proof, the thing that you want to put into your hash into your Fiat-Shamir transform comprehends the statement, so whatever public input you're putting, whatever relation you're proving, as well as the public parameters. And when I talk about public parameters, I mean the generators of the elliptic curves. This was a bug found in Helios when they were able to prove under different generators the discrete log of an element they actually did not know the discrete log of, and the curve identifiers. So these are more difficult to find in the wild, but there is these invalid curve attacks where if you're able to select the curve for another person, the formulae for scalar multiplication do not depend on all the parameters of the elliptic curve, do not depend, for instance, on the inhomogeneous term. So you want to make sure that it's there in case your adversary is able also to convince you to use another elliptic curve. And all these things are very much neglected in papers. And just to give an example and to blame myself for this is one of my papers. And we just say V samples a random challenge. We never say whatever the verifier is really using. And so the hope of this talk is to maybe guide you how do you go from there, to the actual implementation. What we discovered over the years and what I think is the golden standard for how to use Fiat-Shamir is to use a construction called a duplex sponge. So it's a sponge function, so it's going to behave with a sequence of calls of absorbing and squeezing, where we're going to feed it with inputs and we're going to get challenges out. And I think the right mental model to have that was actually introduced by Henry de Valens in a previous library called Merlin was to have a transcript context. So you have an object that is carrying out the state of the hash function throughout the whole protocol, and then you're going to feed it with more data, and you're going to get challenges from it. And in fact, for keeping this context over the last, I would say, 10 years, there has been at least two big approaches. One has been to dynamically embed all the information you have to the transcript. So whenever you're sending a vector to the verifier, you also know you have to embed also the length. And everything is decided at runtime. As soon as you absorb an element, you have to specify how to separate the elements from each other. And this is what is done in a library called Merlin that was used very, very much popular, and now I think is a bit unmaintained. And this is based on the Strobe protocol framework from Mike Hamburg that really tells you how you should embed public and private elements in the wire, etc. And there is another way, which is static. So specifically in zero-knowledge proof, because you know very much the length of the elements that you're going to send throughout the protocol, you can commit to them at the beginning and then work them out. During the protocol, you don't need to specify separations because this is already done at the beginning. And this is what I want to talk about with this new library that I've been developing called Nimue. And it is based on the top of the Safe framework. And the basic idea behind the Safe framework, at least for what I was able to learn, is that you want to commit to the entire message flow at the beginning. So when you start the hash function, you will put this bunch of elements that are encoding the message flow, and I will explain in a second. And after that, it's only concatenation. You just have to concatenate the element because you're already committed to the whole protocol length, to the whole protocol flow at the beginning. Put the domain separator, so the website where you are at. And this is really important, otherwise you're going to you might end up having proofs that can be used across different protocols, and that might be a problem. You want to signal that you're going to absorb a new element, so that's A. You're going to write the length, 32 bytes, and then this element might be the generator. You want to do the same for the public key. This might be a Schnorr signature, for instance. R is ratcheting. I will go over that there in a second. But then, same, you want to absorb another element, you want to squeeze a challenge, you want to absorb a response. You hash all these, you end up with a fixed size element, and then you initialize a function, and you just concatenate from there. So what is the advantage of committing to this whole protocol at the beginning is that we are able to support many more hash functions. Whereas with things like Merlin or Strobe, we were really bound to sponge functions. In this case, we're not bound to Strobe, which is a byte-oriented interface. We can, for instance, support algebraic hashing rather easily. And all this part about committing to the message flow is done outside of the circuit, which is really advantageous because it gains you also a lot of, it removes a lot of burden from the actual proof system where you would have to add inputs in the middle. And another thing that I think is pretty sweet about this model is that it allows you for static composition. When you have to commit at the beginning to how the protocol will look like, there is less risk that in the middle of the protocol later, you will invoke the wrong subprotocol, or that you will decide at runtime as an implementer, oh, I might use this part of the proof or this other of the proof, depending on an extra parameter. So you must know what you're about to prove before starting the whole proof protocol. And I think overall, this allows you to also have more control with operations that are not necessarily supported when you're doing when you're using other frameworks like Strobe. One of them that I really that I think is important and that we add actually on the top of the Safe framework is ratcheting. So because you're keeping the state object throughout the protocol, and this proof system might also take a long time, you might want to avoid storing any avoid recovery of private information even from this state. And one way to do so is through ratcheting. So you invoke the permutation function, you clear the rate, and it's very difficult to go back to the previous state from there. And this is useful for preprocessing because at this point you have the rate that is completely free and you can start a proof system from there. But as well, if you, for instance, before, when we were absorbing also the public key, no information about the public key is going to be kept after a ratchet. So the generator and the public key will be the statement, ratchet, no information about what they were is stored, and then I can continue from there. Interesting. Yeah, so in order to, since this is also part of the ZKProof standardization effort and we want to develop a spec that makes sense, I started developing a new library for it that you can check out, and I will put a link at the end of the talk. And I guess one of the things that where we are maybe diverging from past works is that I think we need to include a little bit extra batteries into this. For instance, we went as far as also supporting previous hash functions like Blake2 or SHA2. We have an entire support in Rust for libraries that just satisfy the digest trait. So what does this mean? It means that you can do Fiat-Shamir with SHA2 if that's a constraint that you need to that you need to keep, or Blake2, which is what happens, for instance, in LO2, etc. And another thing that we went as far as thinking is how do you serialize point and scalars? Because well, this is super important for interoperability because we've seen that different people might encode points differently. And right now, I have something that is compatible, at least between Dalek and Artworks. I want to go as far as supporting also ZK-Crypto's library. And it has less bugs. For instance, it might be really difficult for an implementer to know, should you absorb a projective point or should you absorb an affine point? And it turns out that there are bugs depending on which one you choose. Or for instance, whenever you are squeezing out an element from an element modulo P, this is going to be random modulo P by the guarantees of the sponge function. But it's not clear that it will be still uniformly distributed if you take a certain number of bits of them. It's not clear that it's uniformly distributed modulo 2 to the n. So all these things, I think, need to be handled by a library, and that's what I'm trying to take care of, and that's what we are developing at Nimue. And so the library looks something like this. It has this nice interface where you don't really have to count how many bytes occupies a scalar. You can make it aware of the group that you're using, and then you will put all the elements on the I/O pattern. And this is what the answer will be. We're using, instead of space, null-separated bytes. That's pretty much how much does it take to build an I/O pattern that is valid. And keeping in mind this idea of also preventing bugs and having something that is more interoperable, we have also traits that might help the prover. So whenever the prover wants to generate some randomness, we provide you with a secure random number generator that is also bound to the transcript of the proof. So that problem that we saw before of you get two different challenges for the same message from the prover, that will never happen because also the transcript is also bound to the protocol transcript. Finally, we have byte-oriented transcripts. So whenever the prover is absorbing an element, it will be also kept into a write interface, into a vector of bytes that at the end you can just output as the proof. So serialization is all done by this environment, and it really corresponds to whatever the prover has been sending throughout the protocol. You don't have to worry about whether you included more elements or less. And so just to show you how this is done, this is a Schnorr proof. So you want to get a challenge, you want to multiply, you absorb it, you want to get a challenge, you compute the response, you absorb it, and then you just return the transcript out of it, and this is already serialized. And you know that whatever was done for squeezing the scalars is also what will end up on the other side for generating the transcript because it's handled by the same object. And just as an idea, this is how, just to give you an idea, this is how the verifier is done. You will get the next point from the transcript, you will squeeze a new challenge, and then check the verification equation. So, yeah, this is pretty much it. I'm very happy to go into more details about this. This is the GitHub repo. I would really appreciate more eyes to look into this and also more help. There are a bunch of easy issues that we can all take care of if we work together. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Michele. That was great. We do have time for a few questions and answers. So yeah, please raise the hand if you have any. Come on, anyone?
That's okay.
So in case you are in folding environments or stuff like that where you might need to hash points that are not in the native curve, so you need basically raw bytes in order to fit into the transcript. Do you provide some kind of API also to do that?
I started to think about this, and it really depends on the different orders of the curve. Generally, when you're so yes, I started to think about this. I'm working on like adding it to the library, but I think we agreed on a way in which this can be done securely, and we're just, it really depends on the orders of the points and the hash function. So, because if the hash function is over elements that are bigger than the inputs, then you can just absorb them naturally. But if it's smaller, then you need to make sure that you split them correctly, but also that you split in a way that is smart for a zero-knowledge proof to then treat. So.
Do you have any kind of insight on how this way of splitting looks like, or?
I think you just do modulo division and then you take the remainder. But that seems the right way, unless you're using a normal hash function over bytes, in which case you probably want to split that true to the n. And absorbing is not the problem. I think the big problem is squeezing, because when you squeeze, you have different distribution. And in places like Arcworks or Nova, when we squeeze elements and we would just want bytes, oftentimes they just take 16 bytes. But if you want more, you will end up consuming up to modulus -1, and these last few bits are not uniformly random. I'm not sure there is an actual attack on it, but on the safe side, it's better to cut it a little bit beforehand. And this really depends on the prime that you're using.
Wanted to add something?
Yes, for the squeezing parts, I will give a link in my slides to be next that provides you exact rules how you kind of split and take modulus and so on.
Any other question, anyone? Yes.
For the verifier transcript, would you be able to use Nimue in Solidity right now, or is it only Rust-based?
It's only Rust-based right now, but I think the ideas are settled now. It would be, I don't know, if there is any Solidity developer that is curious about this and wants to write a framework on it or help me with that, I would be really happy to guide them through.
Thank you. You said that you were supporting more standards and older hash functions such as Blake 2. Are you also supporting more recent ones such as Poseidon, CQ, and Nimue?
Right. So the framework is there. While I was testing, I was able to do so. I think the big gap that is there is that things like Anemoi, the implementation, I will just say, is like there are a lot of different parameters. And it's unclear whether I should bring like all these bunch of folders into the project, or I should make a wrapper on it. The way that we develop is just that really that we need just a permutation function, tell me the rate and the capacity, and then everything is taken care of. But this library don't provide just simply the permutation function. They often do a little bit more. Specifically for the implementation of Poseidon in Arcworks, what they have is the parameters are decided at runtime, which I do not necessarily want. So you have a field, and then like from the field, like you need to decide something at runtime. Whereas, I would like to have a set of different parameters that are decided before a compile time. And so, despite Arcworks is very happy to bring all of these into the crypto primitives part, it seems that it requires also a little bit of a change into Poseidon. So I was able to do it with a little experiments. It's not right now in the library. Which, by the way, is like cargo add Nimue, and then you have it and you can play with it.
Thank you. Any other question? Okay, great. Well, thank you again, Michele. That was great. Round of applause, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.